Hey guys, what's up? Public here, back with another video, and today we're talking about my April Fool's post. This is it, if you didn't see it. But I don't just want to go over it because I think a lot of this is coming from a good place. I made this because these are the changes that I would like to see done to the spec. This is not all of them by any means, but these are some of the ones that I was most attached to. So I think a lot of people reacted to this both positively and mostly negatively about the joke, but I wanted to kind of cover it in terms of feedback. Why did I write what I wrote? Should this something be actually added to the game or not? So let's go over this and kind of the state of Shadow and my general thoughts going forward. Okay, so here's the post. It's mostly covering Shadow and our talent tree and talking about ways to improve our talent tree. Before I kind of dive into the specifics and why I made them, let's look at our current tree and kind of what we're currently working with here. So if you haven't seen, this is kind of our preview of what builds are looking like right now on the PTR. So in single target, you basically always pick the nodes in green. And there's a couple different options here. A lot of the time, you're always taking Cthulhu, and you kind of are switching between taking Cthulhu and Yasharj or Cthulhu and Yogg. Both DA and Void form seem pretty competitive. So right off the gate, this looks pretty decent. There's not a whole lot of talents here that we never take, although I wish Death Speaker was a little bit better. Same thing with like Mastermind and Furling Darkness. Shadow Crash has some issues. N'Zoth on single target has some issues still. So really, part of this was to somewhat shore up some of these problems with the spec tree to make it feel like you have more choices here, less nodes that are locked in, and a bit of choice as far as how you want to play the spec. If we scroll down, let's look at dungeons. Dungeons, unfortunately, is a little bit more solved out. Again, points you take here in green, you'll take all the time. You can fill with points in this middle section here, which actually you have quite a lot of options in the middle section. And then to cap this off, you can either take a triple Ida build with Yogg, N'Zoth, and Cthulhu, or just do Cthulhu, N'Zoth with Insidious Ire, and then another one of these points up here. So again, build is a bit more solved here, although there is quite a bit of diversity in terms of this middle section. But again, I think this could generally still be improved, and that's kind of what we're talking about here today. Okay, so going over this, I'm not going to... A lot of this is specific changes. I'm not a game designer. I don't always know the best way to solve something, especially if you're talking about different aspects of the game. This is me coming from a PvE perspective. So, keep that in mind. So let's pull up this real quick. Let's just find our single target build and we can talk about it. So one of the first things, we've talked about this before, I really wish Shadow had some amount of movement displacement. Still missing from our tree. The one I put in the April Fool's post was to give us back Reverse Leap of Faith, which is called Vault of the Heavens, as a choice node with Leap of Faith. Again, some people think this would be too strong. Again, I think at a minute and a half cooldown, maybe you take it a lot, but I still think there are use cases for Leap, and getting to choose between both I think would be an interesting choice. Another alternative here is to give us Door of Shadows or something else, because I think right now we have, like, Razageth was just really hard as a Shadow Priest, or as a priest in general. So I just want something to fill that gap, especially if we ever see a mechanic like that again. The other thing in the class tree was improved mass dispel. So if you didn't see, on the PTR, they actually changed this a little bit. So the cast time is a bit slower on 10.1 than it is with improved mass dispel. So it's really just about the cooldown reduction here. I think that nerf was okay, but I would like to see the mana cost reduced. Right now, if you want to mass dispel anything, especially if you want to do it on cooldown, you can't press any other ability that spends mana. Basically, you're screwed. So would love to see the mana reduced here. Maybe only for Shadow Priest. I'm not really sure. I know it's a bit bothersome in PvP for sure, but yeah, one of the mana costs to come down. Okay, everything else was pretty much just about the spec tree, so let's talk about it. One of the initial reactions, if you saw some of these builds, right, was that you're kind of locked into this top section all the time. We always take all of these guys, so you always take Thought Harvester, you always take Surge of Insanity, and you always take Psychic Link, assuming you're fighting anything more than one target, which will happen quite often. So obviously in very, pure 100% single target, you can drop Psychic Link to pick up one of these utility points. But right now, a lot of the content that we're going to be doing, this is just going to be locked in. So if you want to get Intangibility, Mental Fortitude, Lost Word, or Psychic Horror, you would have to drop Silence or Dispersion, or lose damage elsewhere on the tree, which I think just in general doesn't feel very good. One of the suggestions I gave was, let's just make dispersion and silence baseline. They could just make one of them baseline. That would already free up 1 point, and maybe that's good enough. I'm not sure. But I think that would go a long way to giving us options in this top section for sure. And then I basically said just move these guys up. And then the other feedback I was giving was around Dark Ascension specifically. So Dark Ascension, again, doesn't feel like it's doing a whole lot. I think it's there as the simpler alternative to Void Form, which, sure, if that's what you want to make, that's fine. But I think from a power perspective, if that's all it is, it shouldn't be that competitive with Void Form. So I do think both cooldowns need to be improved. And that's kind of what I was pitching here. What I did for that was to say, okay, Mind Spike and Mind Melt are gone. They're gone from the talent tree. Instead, they're now baked into Dark Ascension. So when you press Dark Ascension, when it becomes active, you transform Mind Flay into Mind Spike, and then you get Mind Melt by default, giving Dark Ascension a bit more of a feely, like making it feel more like a cooldown. It doesn't really add any more complexity to how you play it, but I think that makes it make more sense. Because especially right now, like Mind Spike and Mind Melt on the tree are just kind of weird spells. Like it's weird to talent into a different filler in the tree. It just feels weird. So I think baking those into Dark Ascension would not only help Dark Ascension feel like it has more identity in the spec, it also doesn't ever remove Mind Flay, which a lot of people do like pressing just thematically. So yeah, that's my suggestion for that. And then to counter that, so Void Form to get some extra oomph as well. I would suggest, honestly, I think adding some kind of reason into Void Form to making it feel like staying in Void Form longer is worthwhile. Because it replaces Shadow Form, you're not actually getting extra damage amp while Void Form is active. You're just getting access to Void Bolt and the Mastery increase, which is certainly something, but it's not nearly enough oomph from a cooldown, especially a 2-minute cooldown, to make it feel very satisfying, especially compared to Dark Ascension. So one of the ideas with this is to add some kind of ramping damage. You could just give it a flat, like just give it a 10% modifier, like that would certainly do it. But I think a more thematic thing, especially that it harkens back to old Shadow Priest style from Legion, is to give us ramping dot damage. And, you know, it could be 1% per second. It could be 0.5% per second, like we've had in the past as well. You could also attach it to the extension mechanic. So every time you extend Void Form with Devouring Plague, you get 1% dot damage stacking. And obviously, once Void Form ends, it goes away. I think that would feel amazing. It would feel like a reward for staying in Void Form longer. And I honestly don't think it would be that out of control tuning-wise. Just because, you know, our dots, you know, they are certainly powerful than they have been in the past, but they're not nearly as big as they have been as well. So they're kind of in a sweet spot. So I don't think it would explode it too much, and it would kind of contrast Dark Ascension better to say, yeah, Dark Ascension is your non-periodic spells get buffed cooldown on a 1-minute, you know, CD, and Void Eruption is the bigger 2-minute cooldown. If you play around it, you play with Void Bolt better, you know, you get better results, and you get that periodic damage increase as well. I think it'd be really fun. So yeah, something with that I think would be great. Okay, let's see. What else do we have in here to go over? So obviously I suggested Mind Spike and Mind Melt get removed, so they would need to put something in here to replace these nodes, because I do think overall, like the pathing of our talent tree in terms of like the layout of where nodes is, I think, you know, the pattern is fine. It's just where things are placed are a little off. So I would suggest adding 2 new things to replace these guys. I suggested one that was just the remove this mental decay component that increases Mind Flay and Mind Spike, put that into its own node, and then have a second one that is our current, some version of our current 4-piece, which is after pressing Devouring Plague, you get that haste buff. I think it'd be really fun to see that come back. Which is Dark Reveries. Okay, other side of the tree is the Shadow Crash side. So let's talk about Shadow Crash, Unfurling Darkness, and Mental Decay. So right now, a lot of these guys, you know, from like a dot management perspective, the way that you manage dots in 10.1 is with these 2 points in Shadow Crash, or with while Void Eruption is active, you have Void Bolt for that cleave extension mechanic, right? Or you have manual dotting. I think they can actually give us some choice here of how you want to play the spec, and it's like really, I don't think it's actually that bad or that much work. I think let's talk about Shadow Crash first. So I would actually move Whispering Shadows to be a part of Shadow Crash baseline, but then put the cooldown back to 30 seconds. and then make Whispering Shadows simply just give Shadow Crash a second charge. So then that means you have 2 charges, 30-second cooldown recharge rate. Cool. Already a pretty good improvement in my mind. And then, in addition to that, let's update Unfurling Darkness and Mental Decay to make them feel better in this dot management style that we have now in 10.1. So Mental Decay, already mentioned, let's remove that damage increase to Mind Flay and Mind Spike. And then let's add shadowy apparitions to this. So when a shadowy apparition hits a target, it also increases dots on that target. I think that would make the spec feel really nice and would be a nice supplemental extension mechanic that you could even reason about taking even though you already have Shadow Crash, or you could choose one or the other, right? And then a third option would be to change Unfurling Darkness slightly. I don't know if I explained it very well in the post, but a lot of this is Unfurling Darkness just isn't taken very often in PvE. We don't really care about that instant damage from Vampiric Touch, even though it did get buffed quite considerably in 10.1. It's still not worth pressing. But I think they could change it instead, and maybe it's just a choice node with this. I'm not sure because I don't know how much PvPers like this. But I was saying, okay, when you take Unfurling Darkness, you get 2 charges of an instant cast Vampiric Touch that recharge every 15 seconds or something. Effectively giving you an option to say, like, yeah, if you want to dot on the move with Vampiric Touch, you can do that, just not all the time. I think something like that could give Unfurling Darkness some more life here. And then effectively you have 3 options, or 4 if you count Void Form, of managing dots. You can use Mental Decay, you can use Shadow Crash with the new charge system, Unfurling Darkness to supplement that as well, and then Void Form. You could choose to take all of these if you want to make dots really easy to manage. Or, if you're confident in being able to manage dots, you can move those points elsewhere for more damage, but that means dots are going to be a bit more difficult to maintain. And I think that's a fun gameplay choice, at least in my opinion. So, that's just my one idea with this, but I think it would do a lot. I think my favorite, honestly, the Shadow Crash and Mental Decay changes would be top of my list for sure. Other stuff in this list, Shadowy Insight. So they changed this in 10.1. Right now on live, when you get a proc, you get a temporary charge. So in simplest terms, that means if you're casting a Mind Blast and you get a proc mid-cast, you don't actually consume that proc. But in 10.1, if you're hard casting a Mind Blast and get a proc mid-cast, you would then consume that Shadowy Insight, which just kind of feels bad. You're still getting the increased damage and etc. from our set bonus and all that good stuff. But I think from an experience perspective, that doesn't feel great. For all the other times when you get that cooldown reset, you get way less value out of the cooldown reset if Mind Blast was already about to come off cooldown. So, yeah, it feels like they were trying to reduce the amount of Mind Blast that we were getting out, maybe a PvP reason. But honestly, it doesn't feel great to play with on 10.1. I really want to see it reverted. It does not feel fun. Okay, so let's talk about one of the other changes I suggested. So, kind of going along with 10.1, one of the problems that we have with the spec is we're losing Surge of Darkness, right? So if we go on live, we have this very interesting relationship where we are taking Mind Spike, Surge of Darkness, and sometimes even Mind Melt, especially if we want to get, or usually Mind Melt because we want to get down to Void Torrent, right? Sorry, let me fill this tree out. So then we usually take Mind Flay, Insanity, Void Torrent, all that stuff, right? Which is interesting because, our main filler, especially if you're taking Cthulhu, is still Mind Flay, but then you have these kind of instant cast Surge of Darkness procs to use when you need it for movement. That goes away as soon as we only have one filler, so they can't just add Surge of Darkness back. It wouldn't do anything because we would just consume it all the time. So there's a couple ways that they could solve this kind of massive reduction in being able to handle movement as a Shadow Priest. Obviously, the displacement stuff we talked about earlier would certainly help. But aside from changing Surge of Insanity to be Mind Spike Insanity being instant cast would certainly really be awesome. Or Mind Flay Insanity cast while moving. I think maybe that might be too much. So an alternative there that I suggested in here was for Ancient Madness to be redesigned. And instead, you can spend a talent point to not gain any damage. But what it does is, it says, and then this is what I put in the post, was now grants cast while moving while Dark Ascension or Void Eruption is active. So you can choose to take that as a sense of being like, okay, now you have that movement ability inside your cooldowns. Oops, smash my mic. it's not solving all of our problems, but I think it'd be a really fun node. And again, I think it would still be balanced just because taking it would effectively be a damage loss, right? You could put your points elsewhere, but taking it, if you have a movement fight or something like that, I think would be amazing for the spec. Just my 2 cents, one way to solve or help our movement, for sure. So, okay, so what else do we have on here? I think the other thing I said was to swap Dark Evangelism and Maddening Touch. The main reason I said that was because, Mindbender and kind of Yashar's being like a single targety thing, even an Inescapable Torment, to be honest, it's kind of tuned more single target. It would be nice if we could get down to this area just by taking single target stuff. While Maddening Touch is doing something in single target, Dark Evangelism is usually the kind of more single target node. So I think swapping these would actually make a lot more sense from a pathing perspective. So that's one small thing. I also suggested just to remove Distorted Reality because honestly I don't think the talent is doing anything. I think I kind of understand that what their idea is for the talent, but it's really in practice not really giving you anything. Doesn't really change what you're doing. You would kind of think, okay, maybe it's for like managing more Devouring Plagues in AoE, or having higher uptime of it on single target. But in fact, neither of those things are significantly better with this talent, and it's generally just a DPS loss. I don't know if there's a way to fix it. I would honestly just remove it. That's just my personal opinion. Same thing with Mastermind. I also just suggested getting rid of this. Again, I think maybe PvPers like this, but it just has nothing to do with the tree and its current location. For 2 points, it's super not worth it to get down to N'Zoth. Screams is already a great node to get into N'Zoth. In my opinion, they need to put something else here that is competitive against Screams, of saying, oh, I could reason taking that to get to N'Zoth, which is going to be kind of difficult, but I think that's the direction that I would go here. So the rest of this is kind of addressing some of the problems with our idols. I think in general, the idols felt kind of underwhelming. I'd say they actually did a pretty good job of updating Cthulhu in 10.1. If you guys didn't know, when you press Void Torrent now, you automatically get a Cthulhu tendril. Feels awesome. Love it. But now the other 3 idols I think need some love. I don't really have a whole lot of feedback on how to make Yasharaj, Idol of Yasharaj, feel better. I think just the design is just so weird. I don't know. I think I'd rather just see something else entirely. But so the things that I pitched for N'Zoth and Yogg, let's go over that. So let's go over N'Zoth first. That's kind of the bigger one. So one of the first things that I would love to see is better handling of the N'Zoth debuff. So it's already double target capped. You can only have 4 of the debuffs out at a time, and then when it actually is doing the ticking explosion damage, that is also soft capped. Which is fine. Maybe that's okay. Maybe that's, an easier way to balance the talent. But one of the problems that we have, especially when you take Screams now to get into N'Zoth, you can actually get lucky/unlucky, and you get a proc all the way up to 10 stacks, but then it doesn't actually proc the detonate because those are 2 separate chances. So one easy fix for this is if you hit 10 stacks, you automatically start detonating. That way you never have the ability to munch procs like you do today. I think that would immediately make the talent feel better and be more viable, especially as like if we're AoEing, you definitely want this talent, or that's one way to play. I think it would make a lot more sense. Another suggestion for that alongside this is I think we need to give it some reason to have like synergy with other parts of our kit. Right now, the only way to like have a node that goes into N'Zoth that works with it is by increasing the tick rate of our dots. That's really the only way, and that's exactly what Screams is doing, of some kind of talent that interacts with N'Zoth. Obviously, Yasharaj, anything you do to buff Bender buffs this, or Yogg-Saron, anything with Shadowy Apparitions can buff this, and Cthulhu has all those interactions. But N'Zoth only has it with Screams, and there's really no other way to make something that does that without changing N'Zoth. So what I would suggest doing is updating N'Zoth to make it also work with Shadowy Apparitions, meaning if a Shadowy Apparition hits a target, you also have a chance to give a stack of the N'Zoth debuff. Now, when you do that, now you kind of unlock the ability for N'Zoth Yogg to be a more viable combination of spells, of saying, yeah, when you get things that buff spirits, you can also increase your N'Zoth damage as well. And then if you want to delete Mastermind, you could put something here that works with spirits, tie it close together to Yogg-Saron, and then you can actually talent in through both if you want. I think in general, if they can accomplish that, it would make the idols feel way more universal, and I think would actually help our build diversity out quite a lot. At least that's my gut there. So the one I suggested was make a new talent for like shadow apparitions, move faster, and then deal more damage. You know, that was just something simple to solve one problem with Yogg's Run right now, which is Tormented Spirits isn't really great on single target, especially. So using Yogg on single target, you kind of have to pass through an AoE node, which doesn't feel great. So if they swapped Screams with this new, you know, shadowy apparition based talent, and then connected it also to Yogg Saron, I think that would make it feel, you know, you could get into Yogg Saron without investing into AoE damage, because Yogg is a good single target idol actually. But we'll see. The other thing I was just saying here to fix was Idol of Yogg Saron is still not scaling with our Shadow Priest Mastery. It's the only spell left in our kit that isn't. Still feels like a massive oversight. I'm not sure why it doesn't when everything else with our kit does. So I really hope that gets fixed. It would definitely help the talent's viability. And also the cleave damage isn't... They actually changed the tooltip, and I don't know if that was intentional or not. Basically what happens is N'Zoth, or Idol of Yogg Saron, throws a Void Spike out. It hits the main target, you can see here in the tooltip, for 132% of spell power, and then cleaves out for 40% of spell power. It's kind of weird. I would prefer this worked like other things like Psychic Link, where it just does a flat percentage of what the main hit does on our target. That way the crit chance is kind of tied together in the mastery. Whatever target modifiers are there make it make more sense, basically. Just doesn't work as expected, or I guess what I would expect here. So yeah, I think I covered everything. It was kind of a long video, but hopefully that was interesting. I'm planning on putting all of this feedback on the forums. Hopefully by the time this video is up, you can go check out that post in the description. Sorry to anyone that did not like my joke with this post. It was all in good fun, and I think again this is a good opportunity. It got a lot of visibility. Like, a lot of people looked at the post and maybe got they fell for it or whatever. But I think if it helps raise visibility into some of these problems that we've been talking about, I think it's still ultimately a good thing. So again, apologize if you didn't like it, but I hope this video was interesting. Thank you so much to everyone for watching, and the patrons and the members for supporting me. Greatly appreciate it, guys. And yeah, we'll see you in the next video. Don't know what exactly it's going to cover. Probably more PTR-y stuff. If you're interested, they are changing things quite often, but we'll see. All right. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.